So I was asked a question, how much can starboard hunt up to make port tack? How much can starboard bear away to make port maybe jibe? So here's the answer. So take a situation, you're going upwind on starboard. There's a port tacker who's going to cross you. You don't want them to cross you. You want to protect the right, which is a fundamental tactical principle. So you head up. So now they can't cross you. And they tack and they say protest. Well, first of all, we're going to go to part two of the rule book. Part two is where all the rules are when boats meet. Section A are the right of way. Well, who has the right of way? Well, the boats are on opposite tack. So rule 10 applies. Starboard has right of way over port. So now we know who has the right of way. But then we have to look at section B. Are there any limitations on the right of way boat or the other boat? And rule 16 says when a right of way boat changes course, changes her direction, she shall mandatory give the other boat room to keep clear. It's probably the most important rule in the rule book, and the definition of room is the most important definition. So there on the page. This is the big one right here. If you're on starboard, you have the right of way. If you change course, you have to give the other boat a chance to react and get out of there. You have to give them room. Well, what's room? Room is defined as the space a boat needs. It's the space the port tacker needs to keep clear of you in the existing conditions. If it's blowing 4 or 5 knots in flat water, you don't need as much space. If it's blowing 15 in big waves, you're going to need more space. So you have to factor in the conditions, including space to comply with their obligations under the rules. So if you force a boat to tack to avoid you and they foul another boat, well, you haven't given them room. Room is the space a boat needs to fulfill her obligation to keep clear of you without breaking other rules, including Rule 31, provided she maneuvers promptly in a seamanlike way. So the room is what your boat needs as long as they turn right away and in a seamanlike way. So in this situation, the green boat is about 2 boat lengths away. Starboard, she heads up. She even calls starboard. You don't have to call hail. There's no required hail there. But port is able to tack in a seamanlike way and keep clear. No rules broken. Now, sometimes port bears off and goes behind starboard. You'll see right here in this video. The red boat's going to bear away and go behind the starboard tack boat. Well, in that case, the starboard tack boat is not allowed to bear away and hunt the port tacker. So you can hunt up, but you can't hunt down. And you'll find that in Rule 16.2. It says, in addition to Rule 16.1, in addition to giving room to keep clear, if the boats are on a beat to windward, which means you're sailing upwind to a windward mark, and the port tack boat is keeping clear by sailing to pass to leeward of starboard. In other words, she's borne away. She's going to go behind starboard. The starboard tack boat shall not bear away. If, as a result, the port tack boat must change course immediately to continue keeping clear. This is the anti-hunting rule. So you're allowed to hunt up, but you're not allowed to hunt down on a beat to windward. The phrase beat to windward is interpreted in case 132, but just so you know, if it's an upwind start, you're on the beat to windward after the starting signal, not after you start. You might start 10 seconds after the starting signal, but as soon as the gun goes, now you're on a beat to windward. And if port's ducking you, you can't bear away to make them bear away more to avoid you. Here's a great video in slow motion. Watch number 4 on the left. She's bearing away to go behind 3. Now, watch boat number 3. She's bearing away and forcing 4 to immediately bear away more. That's the foul. Boat 3 just broke 16.2. There is no hunting when a boat's ducking you. Also, this anti-hunting rule only applies when boats are on a beat to windward. So downwind, there's open hunting. You can hunt as much as you want downwind. Before the starting signal, you can hunt as much as you want as long as you give the boat room to keep clear. All right, Scott McGrath, what's your question?
So in that scenario, if you're on, well, I've been on both sides of this, but what happens to if the starboard boat is knocked or has a header and chooses to remain and stay on the wind? Does he, and it looks like he's hunting, is he still hunting if he's got a header?
You mean he gets a header and he changes his course to stay on the wind?
Correct.
Well, Rule 16.2 says, if port is keeping clear by sailing to pass the leeward, the starboard tack boat shall not bear away. If as a result, the port tack must change course. So what's the answer to your question?
Well, is are you bearing away if you're actually staying on the wind?
No, bearing
Yes.
away is changing your course.
I get it, but you're not bearing. You're not. Your your bearing is staying on the wind, not
Okay,
necessarily.
bearing away means you're changing your compass heading. You're changing your course. If you can't use a header to, there's no exception for a header here.
Yeah, Dave, thanks very much. So my question to you is the use of the word immediately here.
Yeah,
So you can have a situation where boats are, let's say, 6 or 8 boat lengths apart. They're
yep,
converging on each other.
yep.
And starboard can change course in that distance, and port doesn't have to immediately change course. So in other words, it seems to me that this rule 16 creates a lot of uncertainty. I like your rule about avoid contact, communicate, and all the other stuff. But the word immediately in here seems to complicate it in my view. What are your thoughts?
Well, listen, some words in the rules are subjective. Immediately is right away. And what they're trying to do is they don't, let's say you're on starboard and there's a port tacker, 6 lengths away and you get a header and for some reason they're bearing away. I don't know why they're bearing away. Well, that can't be a foul with 6 lengths away. Who cares? What they don't want is when port is in the act of ducking you, they don't want you bearing away and make them have to bear away more. That's really risky, and sometimes the rigs lock up. It's really dangerous. So
No, it's
I
funny.
always say use like a 2 boat length rule. I always use like a 2 boat length rule. Once if I'm on starboard, once port's within 2 lengths of me and they're going to bear off, I just hold my course. All right, Tim, go ahead. What do you got?
Yeah, just a quick question prior to the start on this rule. I actually had this happen to me in a big boat regatta 2 years ago. And unfortunately, I never went to protest because the whole start ended up going into a general recall, which is a whole nother topic you could get into. But I was on starboard tack and I bore away onto the port tacker, and they claimed that I was not giving them room to keep clear. And my assessment of it was they had the opportunity to tack, so they had the opportunity to keep clear. What's your take on that?
Well, that'll be up to the protest committee to decide. And, if the port tacker says, I never saw him change course, then they're going to lose that. If they said, there's no way I could have tacked, it would have been a T-bone. My experience is protest committees, once you change course, you've got the obligation to give room. And protest committees can be very generous to the boat entitled to room. I hope you didn't hit.
No, we didn't. We didn't hit.
Yeah, it probably would have been disallowed. All right, here comes another poll. We have a situation. We have 2 boats on port, a blue boat and a yellow boat, and a boat on starboard. And the blue boat yells room, and the yellow boat bears away and avoids them and says protest. So that's the situation. Yellow and blue are sailing along. The yellow boat bears away, sort of to avoid the blue boat, and says protest. And you're the protest committee. So what are you going to decide here? Are you going to disqualify port leeward, the yellow boat? Are you going to disqualify port windward, the blue boat? Are you going to throw them both out? Or are you not going to disqualify either? There was no contact. What are you going to do? Do, 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 do. All right. Well, listen, you guys you've got it pretty much right here. 80% are not going to disqualify either boat. That's the correct answer, and I'll show you why. This is a good example of why the rules are our tactical tools. Sometimes you have rights to do something which, the other boat might go, well, why am I going to give you room? You could have tacked. Well, the rule says so. One thing you have to understand is that anytime there's 3 boats in a situation, there's always 2 boats that have to keep clear of a third boat. So in the picture on the screen, which 2 boats have to keep clear of 1 boat? Well, clearly the 2 port tackers have to keep clear of the red boat on starboard. So by definition, the red boat is called an obstruction, by definition, because she has a right of way over 2 or more boats. And you'll find that in the definition of obstruction. So now we go to section C, which are all the rules that marks and obstructions. And rule 19 is room to pass an obstruction. The question here is, does that leeward boat have to give the inside blue boat room? And Rule 19, it begins by telling us when it applies. Rule 19 applies between two boats when they're at the obstruction, which is when they have to do something to avoid it. There's no zone around an obstruction. It's just when you're near it and you have to do something. Clearly, the two port tackers were near it. 19.2a says the right-of-way boat can choose to pass the obstruction on either side. That leeward yellow boat was the right-of-way boat. She could have chosen to duck or she could have chosen to tack. But B says when the boats are overlapped, the outside boat shall give the inside boat room between her and the obstruction. So in this situation, once yellow decided to duck, the boats are overlapped. She was the outside boat, and she was required to give blue room to pass the obstruction. So the answer is neither boat broke a rule. Now, technically, the windward boat didn't keep clear of the leeward boat, so she broke Rule 11. But here's a perfect example of how exoneration works. Exoneration says when a boat's sailing within the room to which she's entitled, and as a consequence of an incident when the boat required to give her that room, she breaks the rule of Section A, which could be Rule 11, she's exonerated. So had the yellow boat not given her room, and there had been contact between yellow and blue, blue would have broken Rule 11, the windward leeward rule, but she's exonerated. She's not penalized. And to the question of whether blue is required to hail for room, she's not. These are international racing rules, and there's very few required hails. But is it a good idea to call for room? Absolutely. No surprises is my mantra for tactics. It's not in blue's best interest to have yellow not know she's there. So, whatever yellow's number is, 115, I need room. You're not required to hail that, but I think you should. So now what can happen is two or more boats are approaching an obstruction, which could be a starboard tacker, but it could be a shoreline or a dock, just like Steve said. If the leeward boat wants to tack, she can call for room to tack. You'll find that in Rule 20. Rule 20 is room to tack at an obstruction. And Rule 20 says a boat may hail for room to tack and avoid a boat in the same tack by hailing, quote, room to tack. This mandatory hail was put in the rule book in this current rule book edition, which went into effect last year. In other words, in order to be entitled to room to tack, you've got to say those three words. I need room to tack. You can't say, got a starboard tacker, got to go, look out, here we go. You could do all that under the old rules, but no longer. If you don't hail for room to tack, then you have not hailed for room to tack, and the windward boat does not need to respond. Now, I see John's hand up. Let me just finish the thought. If I'm the windward boat, I will always respond. If you say, hey, Dave, I need room to tack, I'll tack, or I'll say you tack. But after the race, I'm going to point out to you, hey, look, next time, the rule requires you to say those magic words. Okay, John, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, we've had this in the Appendix E for an additional complete set of rules, and but the requirement was you must include your sail number room to tack. Otherwise, it's the same as for big boats. But it isn't new to us. We've had it in our international regatta rules for many years. It says when you hail, you have to include your sail number. Yeah, because it's a radio sailing hail, so it must include the sail number of the hailing boat. There's always been confusion about, should I be hailing for rule to tack, or should I be telling the green boat, hey, green boat, I need room to tack? And the answer is no, it's your sail number that counts. Let them figure out who's being hailed.
All right. So, and obviously, if the yellow boat calls for room to tack, the leeward boat and the windward boat needs room to duck, the hail of room to duck is useless, meaningless. The hail of room to tack is what's controlling here. And when the leeward boat hails, the windward boat has to tack as soon as possible or immediately reply, you tack. So it will look like this. The yellow boat's going to say, I need room to tack. And the blue boat's going to say, you tack. Well, what happens if the blue boat tacks first? That's legal, but I don't think that's a very good idea. Because now when the yellow boat tacks, she's got to tack right away, but you're going to be stuck to leeward. I call that tactical jail. You're not going to be close enough to that windward boat to really hurt them. So I always say, you tack. What if the leeward boat says, I need room to tack? So you tack, and they duck. They change their mind. Well, 20.2D says when the hail boat responds, the hailing boat shall tack as soon as possible. So if you call for room to tack, you're tacking. But the windward boat, if you say you tack, you don't need to tack. You just need to give the boat that hailed for room to tack room. So let's say red is on a thin ley line to the windward mark. Yellow calls for room to tack. Well, you have no interest in tacking the leeward of yellow. You're going to duck them both. So you can say you tack, give them room to tack, and you can duck. All right, well, let's get to the leeward mark. Doing well on time here, and I wanted to save about 20 minutes or so, and so we're in good shape here. So the leeward mark is complicated, and it's necessarily complicated because we got to find a way to let inside boats get around the mark, even if they don't have the right of way. That's the puzzle to solve. So to get you in the mood, here's a little leeward mark rounding with a little bit of fun music. All right. So let me run through some scenarios and then save your questions until I'm done with this little section. So obviously we're in section C, part 2 of the rule book, section C at marks. And there's only one rule at a mark. It's rule 18. But in 18, there's about 16 other rules. So it's a bit of a marketing scam. But rule 18 is the rule, and there's 4 parts, 18.1, 18.2, 18.3, and 18.4. 18.1 tells us when Rule 18 begins to apply. When does the light in the fancy hotel bathroom go on? Well, when you open the door of the bathroom, the light goes on. Well, what opens the door to the bathroom in sailboat racing? 18.2 is going to tell us who has to give room. 18.3 is a special rule about tacking at the windward mark. 18.4 is a special rule about jibing at the leeward mark if it's a single leeward mark. And because I think you guys use gates most of the time, you don't spend much time with 18.4. But 18.2 is the big one. And 18.2 is the rule about giving mark room. And there's 5 subsections, A, B, C, D, E. But you only need to worry about 2 of them. 18.2a tells you what to do when the first boat gets to the zone and the boats are either overlapped or not overlapped. Who gets mark room? And 18.2e is a special onus when you're not sure where the zone is, which is really important for you all. So let's go through it. Rule 18 is all based on whether boats are overlapped or not. And you're overlapped or not based on an imaginary line drawn through the back of your boat. It's a line drawn through the back of your boat, perpendicular to your center line, and it goes on forever. In my drawing program, the line only goes for 2 lengths, but that's just a drawing program situation. The line goes on forever. Incidentally, a lot of my drawings for explaining the rule are drawings I use in all my shows. So they might be a 3-length zone. I know it's a 4-length zone for radio sailing. And any special drawings I did for you all, I made it 4. But just remember, you're overlapped. You draw a line across the outside boat stern. And if you look at position 1 in the drawing, the yellow boat's behind that line. The W is behind that line. So the boats are not overlapped, and yellow is clear astern and blue is clear ahead. At position 2, yellow has sailed across that line. She did so because blue changed her course. Yellow didn't change her course, but blue turned left. That line is perpendicular center line, so it moves with your center line. Now yellow's across that line, so she's overlapped. Now, Rule 18 applies when the first boat gets to the zone, and it turns on Rule 18, and it asks just one question. Are the 2 boats overlapped or not? The rule sees just 2 boats. I was doing this a while ago, and some kid says, But Dave, don't the rule writers know there's more than 2 boats coming to the mark? Well, yes, they do. But the rule goes in pairs of boats. You compare the overlap situation to you and another boat, and then you and the 3rd boat, and you and the 4th boat. So that's just the way it is. And 18.2a is very well laid out. It says when the first of 2 boats reaches the zone. So in this case, it's blue. L is reaching the zone. 1, if the boats are overlapped, then the outside boat at that moment shall give the inside boat mark room. If the boats are not overlapped, then the boat that has not reached the zone at that moment, at the moment the first boat got to the zone, shall give the other boat mark room. So in this situation, clearly at position 1, blue's reached the zone. Are the boats overlapped or not? No, they're not overlapped. So 2 applies, and yellow W has to give blue mark room. And then the rule goes on to say, when a boat's required to give mark room by this rule, she shall continue to do so. To do what? She shall continue to give mark room for as long as this rule applies, even if later an overlap is broken or a new overlap begins. And the rule applies until the blue boat has left the mark astern or sailed outside the zone. So in this case, when blue got to the zone, were the boats overlapped? Yes or no? No. Who gives who mark room? Yellow W is clear astern. She hasn't got to the zone, so she has to give blue mark room. At position 2, yellow's got an inside overlap. She's saying, you got to give me room. What's the answer? Too late. You're required to give blue mark room throughout the rounding because it was all settled when they got to the zone. And that's why I say, when you're racing to the leeward mark, you're not. You're racing to the zone. I was asked, how can you best judge where the zone is in radio sailing boats when you could be a long distance away? And I found that when I was racing the radio sailing boats, depth perception was the hardest factor for me. And I'm sure it gets better as you get better at it. Probably gets worse as you get older. I don't know. But there's many ways you can help answer that question, how to judge this imaginary 4-lane zone. In radio sailing racing, Rule E 1.1 says in the definition zone, the distance is changed to 4 hull lengths. In the regular rules, it's 3. Well, you figure on average, boats are going about 3 or 4 feet per second. You're doing 2, 3, sometimes 4 knots. So 3 or 4 feet a second, which means the zone takes you about 3 or 4 seconds from the time you reach the zone to the mark. So when you're about 4 seconds, use 5 seconds for round numbers. When you're about 5 seconds from the mark, you're right at the zone or near the zone. 5 seconds. Just imagine, will I be there in 5 seconds? If I won't be there for another 10 seconds, you're not there yet. Measure 4 lengths of the boats you race, which are usually about a meter, on the lawn or a dock, and put 2 poles there on chalk. Just measure out 4 lengths and put that right on the dock or right on the parking lot so you can see visually what 4 lengths looks like. But most important, be influenced by the onus in Rule 18.2e. So before I get to that, Tim Wright, what do you got?
I'm curious if you were to put a red boat between those two that had an overlap on blue, but also had an overlap on yellow.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So the definition of overlap says if there's a boat between 2 boats and they all overlap, the boat ahead overlaps the middle boat and the middle boat overlaps the trailing boat, then the trailing boat is overlapped with the leading boat.
Okay. So even though this diagram says they're not overlapped, if there was a boat in between that sort of connected them, they would be overlapped.
Yes.
Thank
you. Yeah. All right. Well, 18.2e to me is the most important thing to discuss with you all because having raced the radio sailing boats, and especially if you're running away from where you're standing, it's really hard to A, judge overlaps, and B, judge the zone. But here's this common situation. The red boat B is clear astern of the blue boat A, but she's catching up. She's catching up. She's behind, 6 lengths from the mark, she's behind, but she's catching up. And then she gets in an inside overlap. And she says, hey, I got the overlap before you got to the zone. And the outside of it goes, you didn't get it. You got it after I got to the zone. Well, there's no way to resolve that. But the rule writers understand that. So Rule 18.2e to the rescue. This is in the regular rule book, and it's absolutely what should influence how you sail. 18.2e says, if there's reasonable doubt that a boat obtained an overlap in time. What does in time means? Before the leading boat got to the zone. That's what in time means. If there's reasonable doubt that a boat obtained the overlap before the leading boat got to the zone, it shall be presumed that she did not. She did not get the overlap in time. It could be that the 2 boats are overlapped away from the mark, and the outside boat tries a tricky move to break the overlap at the last second. Well, if there's reasonable doubt that the boat broke the overlap in time, it'll be presumed she didn't. The way you play this, guys, is that whatever boat is making the change near the mark, it should be presumed that it didn't happen. If you're catching up to a bunch of boats and you're getting down 5 or 6 lengths from the mark, then assume that if you get the overlap, it's probably going to be too late. If the outside boat contests it, you're going to lose that. That's the onus. And if it goes to a protest, the protest committee will presume. They're not going to ask, what was the relationship of the boats when the lead boat got to the zone? They're going to ask, what was the relationship of the boats 3 or 4 lengths before the boat got to the zone? Well, I was clear astern at that point. Well, you're going to lose. If you were clear astern, 8 lengths from the mark, and you claim to have gotten the inside overlap before the other boat got to 4, and they dispute it, you're going to lose that. So the tactical tips from this are start talking about the overlap situation 6 to 8 lengths, 8 to 10 seconds before you get there. Hey, 113, you don't have an overlap. 1289, you've got an overlap. Start talking, 10 seconds before you get there. Start the talking then, which sets up the onus. You're establishing the relationship of the boats then. Number 2, rely on the last point of certainty. In other words, whatever you're sure of, rely on that. We're sure these boats were not overlapped in position 1. We're not sure whether the red boat got the overlap in time. And finally, when in doubt, don't stick it in there. The rules aren't precise enough. The zone it's vague. So just accept that. And if you're catching up, it's a bad place. As Steve Landau said, it's a bad place to try and pass the boat right at the mark. Round behind them, have a better rounding, pass on the next leg. So I've talked about how 18.2a is all about the overlap situation when the first boat gets to the zone. I've talked about some helpful tips on knowing where that zone is, how to play it when there's a little bit of uncertainty, which there always is. Any questions for me on anything so far about that? Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
So invariably, at the leeward mark, a boat that rounds to port and tacks in front of the following rounding to port boat will tack onto starboard. How do you play that? I mean,
mark room does not include room to tack.
Right.
So if you round the mark and tack, the moment you go past head to wind, you're a tacking boat and you have to keep clear. And if the boat behind you has to bear away and avoid you before you get down to close hauled, you've broken Rule 13. You do not get room to tack around the mark.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep, good question. All right, well, let's talk about how much room does the inside boat get? It's a Seamanlike rounding. People have asked, well, how much is Seamanlike and all that? Good question. So here we have 3 big regular sailing boats coming into the mark here. They're all on port tack. So clearly this green spinnaker boat is a windward boat. She has to keep clear. And the boats to her right are leeward boats, and they have the right of way. But once you get to the zone, Rule 18 says that outside boats have to give inside boats mark room. In other words, what I always say is outside the zone, think right of way rules. But inside the zone, think inside outside rules. It changes. So even though those big boats on the outside are the right of way boat, they need to give that inside windward boat mark room. The inside boat doesn't get the right of way. A lot of people think she's the right of way boat. No, she's a windward boat. But she gets mark room. And mark room is just enough room for her to sail to and around the mark in a seaman-like way. I'm going to show you how the rule says that. And to me, seaman-like is within about a half a length of the mark. Not at risk of touching the mark and not at risk of touching the outside boat, but no more than that. So in this picture here, I think she's sailing within the mark room she's entitled. She's within a half a length of the buoy. She's not hitting the outside boat. That's mark room and the outside boat's giving it. If she were to take more room from that, then she wouldn't be within mark room and she would be penalized as a windward boat. Now let me show you how the rules say that. So Rule 18.2, when the first of 2 boats reaches the zone, if the boats are overlapped, the outside boat, which remember could be the right-of-way boat, shall give the inside boat mark room in italics. That means there's a special definition of definitions. The definition of mark room is room for a boat to do 3 things. If you're entitled to mark room, you get room to sail to the mark, you get room to round or pass the mark on the required side, and then you get room to leave the mark astern, so you're no longer overlapped. You get room to sail to and around the mark. And room is defined as the space a boat needs. The space the inside boat needs to sail to and around the mark. in the existing conditions. In light air and flat water, you're not going to need as much room. But if it's blowing 15 and there's waves, you're going to need more space. So room is elastic. It depends on the conditions. It's room for the boat to round the mark, including space to comply with the rules of Part 2. She's a windward boat. She's got to comply with Rule 11 as a windward boat to keep clear. And Rule 31, touching a mark. Mark room is roomed around the mark without touching the mark, as long as your boat is maneuvering promptly in a seamanlike way. Mark room is roomed around the mark in a seamanlike way. Well, how much is seamanlike? Well, the definition of room says in a seamanlike way. It's generally defined as seamanlike is just enough space to round the mark so you're not at risk of touching the mark or hitting the boat outside of you. You all in radio sailing boats are going to need a lot less space to go around the mark than a 30-footer. So it's the space you need to go around the mark in the existing conditions. That's seamanlike, what a competent but not expert sailor would do to go around the mark. I think of mark room as the yellow brick road. I love this picture. Think of mark room as a special corridor. It's just wide enough to have you get around the mark without risk of hitting the mark or touching the outside boat. If you stay on that path, then you're protected by mark room and you're exonerated if you break any rules. If you're an inside windward boat and the outside boat, you hit the outside boat, you've broken Rule 11. But if you're within mark room, if you're sailing within a half length of the mark, let's say, you're exonerated for breaking Rule 11. But let's say you're a boat length away from the mark. Well, that's not mark room, so you're no longer protected by mark room. You're not sailing on that yellow brick road, and you'll be, if you're protested, you'll be penalized for breaking Rule 11. So that's how it works. And notice you're never exonerated for breaking Rule 14. So if you go in there and you're entitled to room and you smash into the outside boat and you've broken Rule 14 and you could get penalized if there's any damage. So let me finish this thought and I'll answer your questions. So that's the answer. Mark room is a seaman-like rounding, about a half length from the mark, maybe a little more when it's rough and windy, and that's how that works. Now I was asked, what about you coming into the finishing line? Can the leeward boat force the windward boat on the wrong side of the finishing line? No. Once you get to the zone, it's over. Once you get to the zone, Rule 18 says to that outside leeward boat, you've got to give that blue boat mark room, which is room for her to pass the mark. You can still beat her across the finishing line, but it's over. So that's the key, guys. When you reach the zone, there's no more fooling around. Once the boats are in the zone, it's a safe zone for inside overlap keep clear boats. They're safe inside there. It's a transition zone from the previous leg to the next leg. And outside right-of-way boats, you have to put down your sword for a minute and let that inside keep clear boat get around the mark in a seaman-like way. So questions for me on how much room is mark room? Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave, I got two things. So the first thing is sometimes I hear debate discussion at the mark about a tactical rounding versus seaman-like.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay, so I'll pass on that. The second question had to go back to the video that you were showing. You showed the three boats going around the mark, but then there was a boat tucking in at the end, and clearly the outside boats were going to go wide. So I think the sail number is 9233 or something. It's this boat coming in right here.
Right.
So those boats are going to wash out wide. What's the scenario with 93, whatever, 39?
Well, the boat astern has to give all those boats ahead mark room. Do you agree?
Yes, I mean, they wasn't overlapped at the zone, but now there's room left.
No, but they have to give mark room. Mark room is for the boats ahead to sail to and around the mark in a seaman-like way.
Yep.
Have they been able to do that?
Those boats are going to wash out behind when they give the inside boat room.
Right. If the boat astern goes in there and doesn't interfere with those other boats, doesn't change their rounding, then that boat astern's given them mark room, and they take advantage of room freely given.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah, but they got to be careful. So let's go to the next piece here. First of all, I always say good fleets of boats, they come in like chopped meat, and they go out like a string of sausage. So don't argue about how much room the inside boat's taking. Always follow the leader around behind the inside boat and right next to the mark. It's just bush league to even suggest the inside boat is taking too much room, because that means you're overlapped outside of them where you don't want to be. You want to be have your bow free so you can round behind them. Now here's a common situation of the right-hand gate mark looking downwind. The blue boat's on port and the black boat's on starboard. And boom, the boat on starboard has to avoid them. Well, how does that work? Well, let's look at the diagram here. I'm gonna launch a poll. Your last quiz here. Let's see if you can go 3 for 3. So here's what happened. You got the green boat SO. You got the red boat PI. You can see the zone. These are the 3-lane zone for these kind of boats, but imagine it's a 4-lane zone if you want. And the green boat has to avoid the red boat. It says protest. There's no contact, and you're the protest committee. So what are you going to do here? There's a bonus quiz. Are you going to disqualify that red boat, PI? Are you going to disqualify the green boat, SO? Are you going to chuck them both out, or are you not going to throw either one? And I'm just here to tell you, you know enough. From what I just said, you can answer this question. Close your blue book and let's see who decided. Well, look at this. A third of you are going to throw the red boat out. 10% are going to throw the green boat out. Nobody's going to throw both boats out. And 60% are not going to disqualify anybody. It kind of reinforces the age-old thought that if you go to a protest, you've got a 50-50 chance of losing it. Going to a protest is usually not enjoyable or productive. Better just do your turns. Do your turns when in doubt. But let's find the answer. Let's find out the answer here. So I'm going to walk you through it just so we're on the same page. First of all, Rule 18.1 tells us when 18 applies. It applies between boats when they're required to leave the mark on the same side, and at least one of them is in the zone. Well, when did the first of the two boats get to the zone? At position 1, the green boat reached the zone. In this case, he was 3 lengths away, and model racing will be 4 lengths away. And that turned 18 on. And 18.2 says, hey, are the boats overlapped or not? What's the answer? Well, if you draw the line across the green boat's transom, and remember it goes on all the way up the race course, clearly the red boat is not behind that line. She's clearly across it. So these boats are overlapped. And 18.2A1 says if the boats are overlapped when the first boat gets there, the outside boat at that moment shall give the inside boat mark room. Well, who's the outside boat? The green boat is. Well, she's on starboard. Who cares? She's the outside boat, and she needs to give the red boat mark room. Well, how much room is mark room? It's room for the red boat to sail to the mark, then to round or pass it on the required side and leave it astern. Room is a seaman-like rounding. The port tack boat doesn't have the right of way, so she doesn't get to go as wide as she wants. She can only go, about a half a length of the mark. So if she comes in on port, her boom is clearly within half a length of the mark. When she jibes, she's about a half a length, and when she rounds it, she's about a half a length. In other words, she just jibes around the mark. The green boat gives her room to do that. She's required to. So the green boat's giving mark room. The red boat's breaking Rule 10. The starboard tacker have to avoid her, or Rule 11. But she's exonerated. She's on that yellow brick road. So she's exonerated. So the answer is neither boat is disqualified. Now, same at the finishing line. Outside the zone, it's port starboard. Inside the zone, it's inside outside. So here, this yellow starboard tack boat needs to give the blue boat room. Now, there are situations where the inside boat does have the right of way. Here's an example where they're coming in on the yellow and blue boats are on starboard, the red boat's on port. The yellow and blue boat need to jibe around the mark, but they're the right-of-way boat. So they don't need the protection of mark room. They're the right-of-way boat. 18.4 says that they need to sail no farther than their proper course. That's 18.4. So swing wide, cut close. Some people call it a tactical rounding. So if you're the right-of-way boat and on the inside, you get to sail a tactical rounding. You can go wide and tight. You got the right-of-way. You're a little cooler. I think a boat length and a half max, depending on the conditions. So if you're on the inside of the right-of-way, you do not need to sail just a seaman-like path. You can go wide and tight. And remember, 18.4 doesn't apply at a gate mark. So at a gate mark, an inside boat with a right-of-way can do whatever she wants. And the outside boat needs to beware. But if the outside boat jibes and goes to the other mark, then who cares? She'll get mark room at that mark. So that's the difference between a seaman-like rounding and a tactical rounding. A boat without the right of way gets a Seamanlike, just enough to get around it. A inside boat with the right of way gets to go as wide as she wants. Or in this case, if there's only a single leeward mark, her proper course. So questions for that? Dick, go ahead.
Just the other day, two boats coming down towards a gate, gonna round to port, and the A boat is ahead by a little bit, but the B boat is definitely going to be the inside boat, and the proper course after rounding the mark would be about 135-degree turn, but the inside boat only turns about 90 degrees and sails off for 10 boat lengths before heading on upwind. At what point does the outside boat have luffing rights? In other words, when is that mark rounding over and it's about luffing rights?
Yeah. So mark room is room to sail to the mark, round or past the mark on the required side, and leave it astern. Once the mark has been left astern, it's over. Mark room is over. Also, if the inside boat doesn't have the right of way, in your case, it sounds like she was a windward boat. If she's sailing more than like a half length from the mark, she's taking too much room. So she's not protected anyways. If she's not heading up to close hauled, she's not protected by mark room and she's breaking rule 11. But let's say, Dick, she's making a normal rounding and you're the leeward boat. You can't luff her until she can respond to your luff without hitting the mark. So generally, let her leave it astern. Let her pass the mark and then luff her head to wind.
Great, thank you.
All right. All right. Well, listen, we're at the end. So other questions for me? We'll go wheels down in a couple minutes, but this has been great. We're at the leeward mark. Any other questions? Or John, has there been anything in the chat which has been a recurring question?
Yeah, I jotted down three questions that you might want to just quickly revisit. One was discussion about proper course and Rule 17 and before the start. Yeah, I think the relationship was what is proper course and then how does it apply before the start? That was kind of a related question.
Okay, let's check that one. If a boat comes to leeward of another boat from clear astern within 2 lengths, that's Rule 17. And it says the leeward boat cannot sail above her proper course. Let's say it happens with 30 seconds to go. In the definition of proper course, it says a boat has no proper course before the starting signal. So before the starting signal, you can't break Rule 17 because you don't have a proper course. So if you come in from astern, you can go up to head to wind as long as you give the windward boat room to keep clear. But at the starting signal, you got to sail your proper course, which means bear away and go. Well, here's a news flash. You probably bore away 5 seconds before then. So that's the answer. Okay, John, what's the next one?
Okay. Can you explain what a third-party protest is? Somebody was saying, I saw an incident. Can I protest it? I wasn't involved in it, but I saw it.
Yeah. So setting aside the fact there's a little problem with the current rule, which a case is going to fix, any boat can protest another boat for breaking a rule. It doesn't have to be the boat that was fouled, but you got to tell them you're protesting them. You got to tell the race committee after the finish, and you got to tell them, put it in within 10 minutes. So a third party would be, I think I saw you and another boat foul. I'm going to protest both of you. But you have to say protest and protest them. All right, what's the other one, John?
Well, I'm going to qualify it. In radio sailing, in order to do that, you have to have been scheduled to be sailing in that heat.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Right.
The last one was, can I use like a 1.5 power binocular to help my vision as a vision aid
While you're driving a car?
while you're sailing, while you're
John,
racing?
what's the answer to that?
The answer is yes, you may. The question is you're not really receiving outside assistance, but there is a specific rule that forbids umpires and observers from using binoculars to get a better view than the sailors have from the control area.
All right.
So, yeah, you could use one of those. The problem is they limit your depth of field, and also they have a foreshortening effect. So make cause more problems than it's worth. And that's it.
Hey, just a quick question. In big boat racing, we're racing at the preparatory signal. With the 2-minute sequence in radio sailing, when are we officially racing? I don't think I've ever really seen that
from the
defined.
1 minute signal.
From the 1 minute signal.
Yeah, because that is our prep, and it says the 2 minutes is our warning, and the 1 minute is our prep, and you're racing from the prep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Good information.
This has been wonderful. If during the talk you realize, wow, I really do need to up my rules game, it would really help me tactically and do better. Remember, my books are there to help you. Understand the racing rules of sailing, explain the rules. 100 best quizzes. Every page is a situation. That's a good way. And then winning one designs is all about racing. So again, Len Bose, I'm so glad you contacted me. It was about a week ago or so we did this. I'm so glad it worked out. John Ball, I can't thank you enough. What a great addition you've been. If you guys enjoyed this, let Len know. Maybe we can do this in another 6 months or so. In the meantime, great luck in your racing. I'm going to close the show down, and then I'll come back in for more questions. But right now, we're done, and good luck in your racing.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dave.
Dave.